Hello everyone, it's been a while and I hope you're doing great. I finally have some time to make a new video, so I will be featuring a team that I made half a year ago. Now at that time, Raikou was traditionally considered a special offense mon, with a straightforward strategy of eliminating Blissey with Dugtrio and then sweeping. Now, recently people have explored it outside of that archetype, but back then this team was one of the earlier attempts at stretching Raikou beyond its conventional supporting structures, and by that I mean avoiding using Dugtrio to trap special walls and spikes to wear down grounded threats. So anyone who ladders knows that it's difficult to climb high without sand, spikes or trappers, so I'm pretty glad that I managed to top the ladder with this team. And another feature of this team is that it has really weird sets, and I actually named this team All Sets Are Weird, which you will soon see. But first, let's talk about what's special about Raikou. So the first thing is that it has 361 speed, and that is essentially the highest speed you can get for a flexible sweeper. What I mean is that obviously Dugtrio and Aerodactyl are faster, but both of them are choice benders, so you usually need to switch to sweep, and you can deal with arrow, or rather the opponent can deal with arrow by pivoting. And similarly, Dugtrio's so-called sweep comes to an end when a flying type comes in. So what can it do with this speed? Well, compared to say Zapdos, it outspeeds all other base 100s, including Zapdos itself, Salamence, Flygon. It outspeeds Gengar, which can easily boom on Raikou to stop its sweep. Some utility Pokemon like Defensive Starmie, which usually drops some speed. And these days, all special offense makes their Duck really slow, so it also beats special offense pretty easily. Okay, but you may ask, why Raikou and why not Jolteon? Well, the first thing is that Raikou has Calm Mind. So Calm Mind provides the power boost when we don't have spikes, and that allows it to do some things like one-hit KO Swampert with Hidden Power Grass. It allows it to also KO Gengar with Crunch if you have it, and also Salamence if you have some chip before it does a DB Dragon Dance boost and sweeps you instead. And the second thing is that Raikou actually has Crunch, and Crunch is really useful because it lets you hit Celebi while still maintaining HP Grass, so you are able to hit Celebi and Swampert at the same time. Okay, so that's Raikou offensively, and what about defensively? Now, Raikou is also a secondary special check, or at least, even if it doesn't take special hits very well, it's a great momentum reverser against the special attackers, which is important because mixed offense usually relies on Snorlax for special checking. And, Snorlax gets worn down really easily, so by using Raikou, we can actually make our Snorlax a little bit more offensive later when we choose the sets. Okay, so what kind of preparation does Raikou need in order to be effective? Now, obviously, we need to get rid of the most prominent threats, which are Tyranitar and Metagross. And speaking a little bit more about Tyranitar, it's not just the Pokemon, but also Sand, because Raikou as a special sweeper that needs a turn to set up needs a form of status protection. So that can be in the form of Substitute, which takes away some HP, or it can be something like Lumberry. But in any case, Sand really hurts it because you want to be able to recover that HP loss from Substitute, or just not get killed by Sand if you are not using leftovers. The other thing is that now that we don't have Dugtrio, we need a way to deal with Blissey, or at least Blissey themes. And we also need a way of dealing with Dugtrio teams as well, because slow ducks aren't the only ducks on the planet. We need to think about what happens when a typical fast Dugtrio, for example in those Milo Bliss teams, comes onto the scene. So there are many conditions here for Raikou to work, and we need to have alternative solutions like matchup division as well in case something doesn't work the way it's meant to. So the first teammate I'm going to talk about is Snorlax, because I mentioned earlier that Raikou being a secondary special check allows Snorlax to be a little bit more offensive, and that is what Snorlax needs over here, because I want to use it as a lure for Metagross and Tyranitar, and so I'm going to use counter on Snorlax, and I'm going to fill the rest of Snorlax moves with what we usually know of it, which is body slam, focus punch, and I think Shadow Ball. So note that I am dropping Boom over here, which opens up weaknesses to Milotic, SubCune, and Celebi, which I'll have to consider later on. But for now, counter is really great because we have other forms of special checking and momentum reversing, and not just Raikou, but I will show you Claydol later on. And so we'll run with this set for now, and the EVs are just what you know of a standard Snorlax. So now that I have a way to deal with Metagross and maybe Tyranitar, I need to think about how to deal with Blissey and Sand. And the thing about Blissey is that there are a whole variety of teams with Blissey, and I can't always reliably take it out. But I can ask, what does a typical Blissey team look like? And mostly it doesn't have Celebi, and sometimes it has Zapdos but not always. So without Celebi, Monokune becomes really good. And when I say Monokune, I mean something like Calm Mind Surf and 2 support moves. So usually something like Rest Talk, but that's not what I'm looking for here because I'm also trying to do some weather clearing for Raikou. So instead, I'm going to use Substitute and Rain Dance. Now these two moves complement each other really well because Rain Dance clears Sand for SubCune to be able to substitute 6 times in order to maximize its Calm Mind boost to beat Blissey. And this generally is a really nice set if you have managed to fool the opponent into thinking that this is some kind of Rest Talk set. And so when Blissey tries to Seismic Toss down SubCune, hoping that it could phase it out when it's resting, and learns that it's Substitute and can't set Sand because of Rain Dance, then it really just overruns the opponent. Now, as for the EVs, I decided to make it quite fast, and that's because a lot of defensive Pokemon like Jirachi and Celebi, they hover around the 244 range, maybe even some rare Zapdos. So getting a little bit faster than those Pokemon in order to use Substitute on their status moves can be really helpful over here. Okay, now we can think about what kind of counterplay we want against Dugtrio teams. So the kind of teams that we're afraid of are those that have fast Dugtrio, which usually belong on those mono water type teams, not the special offense kind of teams. And those teams usually look something like Dugtrio, Milotic, Skarmory, Claydol, and something else. But that Milotic could well be a SubCune, or it could well be a mono Surf Pert, and sometimes even a defensive Starmie. But in any case, a lot of these Pokemon use status to deal with Salamence, and so instead of using just the standard Dragon Dance Salamence, I'm going to use Dragon Dance Refresh Salamence. And this move can basically sweep many of these mono water type teams just hands down. Well, the other problem that you have to deal with, however, on these teams is that they usually pack Blissey, and there are going to be a few things I'll have here to deal with Blissey. The first is Brick Break, alright? And the second is that I'm going to really bulk this Salamence out. So as you can see, I have this spread over here that maximizes HP and also has a whole bunch of special defense. Now this lets me survive Blissey's Ice Beam as long as Sand is not in operation. And I can get all this bulk because Salamence doesn't really need all that speed if I'm not going to be able to beat Aerodactyl anyway. So the last move is just going to be Hidden Power Flying, and that's just because I need Stab to beat stuff like Celebi, for example. I'm just going to change the HP Flying EVs over here. Now, you might be worried that this set is a little specific. Like, what if I don't use, what if I don't encounter a mono water team? Well, or what if I need Earthquake? So the good thing is that, Earthquake doesn't hit, or rather it hits Metagross and Jirachi, which Brick Break doesn't. But Metagross would already have been lured by Snorlax, as I mentioned earlier, and we'll talk about how we can lure Jirachi with Claydol later. So that's taken care of. And the second thing I want to say is that it actually does really well against Blissey T-Tar teams, even if those are not Mono Water teams, such as Big 5 TSS. So if you just think about the Big 5 TSS teams, like what do they contain, right? They have obviously Blissey, which you can deal with Brick Break. They have Skarmory, which you can refresh away the Toxic. And as for the other Pokemon, well, for Swampert, if you have the bulk to deal with Blissey, you have the bulk to deal with Swampert's Ice Beam as well, which is usually weaker. And we also have the special defense to deal with Gengar. So we survive Ice Punch as well. So this is overall actually a really versatile set that can take down more teams than you expect from just how specific its moves are. Okay, so to figure out the next Pokemon that we want on the team, let's think about a typical sequence that we will face against a TSS team. Now, SubCune leads and faces a Tyranitar lead, so I serve the Tyranitar and Blissey comes in. Then Snorlax comes into the Blissey, focus punches the incoming Skarmory, and then Skarmory spikes. And now it can do a few things. One of them being going to Gengar, another being going with Drill Peck, and another being just Protect. So I want a Pokemon that will be able to deal with all three options, and the one that I decided on is Mixed Metagross. Now, there are two kinds of Mixed Metagross. There's the HP Grass Thunder Punch kind, and there's also the Psychic HP Fire kind. Now, both of them have their pros and cons. Generally, the HP Grass T-Punch kind is a little less consistent because it relies on super effective moves. But if you can nail the right moves and the right booms, that really makes a lot of progress. The Psychic Fire one is a little more consistent. They have slightly different targets, and I think I'm going to go for a Psychic Fire version here, not just because of the consistency, but also this team is kind of weak against Snorlax, so I really want Meteor Mash on this Metagross, which makes Hidden Power Fire a more natural fit. Another good thing about the Psychic Hidden Power Fire set, I guess, is that this Metagross basically lures Swampert. So if I'm able to chip it down to really low HP, then Salamence can take over and break through the rest of the TSS team. So that's what it's going to be: Psychic, Hidden Power Fire, and Meteor Mash. And I'm just going to use a bulky set because that maximizes my odds of breaking through Swampert. Okay, so at this point, let's consider what weaknesses we have in this team so far. Now, the first that I mentioned early on is that there is a weakness to specials, and mostly Zapdos, because we have a Snorlax that's going to be traded off early with counter. And we also have a weakness to Diditar because while we are breaking Swampert with Metagross, Mixed Metagross, it's physically weak and it's going to be at low HP. And finally, we are going to have a weakness against CM Rachi because Snorlax doesn't have Earthquake, Mence doesn't have Earthquake, and Metagross is special. So I think Claydol fits really well here. But the question is, what kind of Claydol do we use over here? So let me make a little tangent and explain what I think is Claydol's role in offensive teams. So I think that in offensive teams, Claydol rarely spins, and that's because first, you need to get rid of Skarm for Claydol to be effective. Mixed offense is always focused on breaking down Skarm, and you don't want to give Skarm a chance to heal. But if you're not using Claydol until Skarm is removed, then by that time, you're already in the late game. And in the late game, is removing spikes or doing damage more important? I reckon that it's usually doing the damage, because at that stage you're probably not switching around much anymore, and instead you need to stop DD or Raikou or Urgily Meta or Zapdos. So I'm going to use Choice Band over here, because I think more often than not the opponent won't be pivoting out and you will get to hit your Earthquakes. And the other thing is that, you know, the checks that I have over here to say Zapdos and DD and Raikou are really weak, and so I really appreciate the extra power. And for the last move, because I mentioned Zapdos so much, I'm just going to give it Rock Slide. This situation happens more than you expect. Now for the EVs, I'm just going to give it an Impish Nature and Max Attack. So what this does is that with Max HP and an Impish Nature, I will always survive DD+2 HP buff. But with Choice Band, I'm going to be able to 2-hit KO it, even if it has leftovers. Okay, well, I just have to make a little caveat over here, which is that I said that spin may not be the most important thing to do at the end game. That's quite true, but it's less true if the sweeper that I have is slower, which means that there's an opportunity for something to come in and force me to switch, or if the opponent is using an arrow, then then obviously outspeeds Raikou, and I need to be able to tank Rock Slides with Metagross, for example. But at least in this case, I'm using pretty much the fastest flexible sweeper, and so I'm less afraid of that. So the final question is, what Raikou set do I use? So the team is not very strong against Celebi. It can't easily lure it or chip it. And SubCune doesn't have Ice Beam, Lex doesn't have Boom, and Celebi teams usually have other Pokemon that can deal with mixed meta, so I can't necessarily trade it. So I'm going to use Crunch on this set, and Hidden Power Grass, obviously, as the last move. So at least this helps me deal with Celebi, but as I mentioned earlier, it's also very difficult to use this set without status protection, because some of Raikou's best setup targets, such as Zapdos, Gengar, Moltres, Jirachi, Milotic, Defensive Starmie, Magneton, they all have status moves. And so I'm going to use Lumberry over here to prevent them from messing up the sweep. And this is why, again, removing Sand is really important. So I should point out that it's still susceptible to Leech Seed from Celebi, but by not using an item, you also fake Raikou being substitute with a Boost Berry, and so Celebis may not be most interested in leeching Raikou without knowing its set beforehand. So the first game that I'm going to show you is played against a special offense team. It's a rather simple game, and you'll see that I'm outplayed early on in the game, but due to some team building choices I made, I'm able to come back later on. Okay, so I go to Snorlax first against Zapdos, and you can see over here I'm thoroughly outplayed. Okay, and I land basically not a single hit. As he goes to Tyranitar, and I go to Metagross. I thought he would switch out, but he didn't. Okay, so now I've gotten Tyranitar to trade with Metagross, which is great because now this inclines my opponent to sack T-Tar later on, as you will see. Okay, and so my opponent goes to Zapdos, and with low HP left on my Snorlax, now Claydol becomes very useful in this matchup. And now you can see over here that I fire a CB Slide, and this CB Slide will turn out to be rather pivotal because it puts Zapdos into a range where DDMence can take it out with just HP flying. And let's just continue watching the game. Alright, here I expected a switch, but apparently that did not happen. Okay. Okay, so now I should point out over here that a burn Snorlax is actually very dangerous because, well, your opponent can burn you, but now what do they do? And you see over here that he's not going to let his Gengar die to more Shadow Balls. And so I'm able to focus punch the Tyranitar that comes in. And that clears the way for me to remove Sand. Okay, and now DDMence does a lot of damage, but not before I verify that the Pert is not really going to do anything to it. Okay, so now I get the rain done, so there's no more sand. And now, because of Salamence's special defense investment, I'm able to DD up, and before he knows that I don't have Earthquake, he's taken a lot of damage. Doug is removed. Yep, and now Rachi is sufficiently chipped for me to clean the game with Raikou. And the chip on Gengar, I should mention, is not something that was useless, because Raikou can't necessarily one-hit KO Gengar even with CM and Crunch. You know, it's just like how Tyranitar cannot necessarily KO Gengar with Crunch. So that little chip was actually pretty important for making sure I don't get boomed on right here. So you can see that Raikou does really well in the special offense matchup. Now in this game, I think you can see how Choice Band Claydol shines. So let's take a look. So I go through the usual plan of chipping Skarmory with Focus Punch and Hidden Power Fire from Metagross. So as you can see, Metagross is the perfect switch into whatever mid-grounds my opponent has. And now Skarmory's HP is getting worn down. So here I have an unexpected use of Salamence. Refresh basically acts like the natural cure on this team. So I'm able to easily switch it into Moltres and not be too worried about it. And again, because I'm able to refresh on Skarmory, so I'm not too worried about it as well. And that's exactly what happens here as I wear it down. Okay. And now, facing Jirachi here. Now, recall that Jirachi is very scary for my team. I don't have Earthquake on any Pokemon except Claydol. So what would I do over here? I have 3 spikes on my side, but I'm facing, you know, a pretty scary Jirachi. And with any other Claydol set, you know, if I spin here, I'm getting myself into a lot of trouble. If I don't have Choice Band, I'm not able to kill the Jirachi, and Jirachi basically sweeps the rest of my team. Especially with the Bolt Beam combo and with my Metagross being special. But thanks to Choice Band Earthquake, I'm able to take it out. And you know, nobody would be switching to Skarm over here. You have a Jirachi that has a CM up. You have 3 spikes on the opponent's side. You know, my side, and I'm really pressured to spin. So you know, it's very easy to get Claydol to lock in on a particular move without the opponent pivoting. So anyway, I continue the game plan. I just trying my best to set up a Raikou sweep right now, and I know that Raikou can get past Celebi eventually. If the last Pokemon is a Swampert, that is. And let's just fast forward this. And well, okay, I do manage to get the spin off, so I'm somewhat fortunate there. Okay, and because T-Tar was sacked, I'm able to clear the weather. And now let's take a look at this very final sequence. So the opponent knows that I don't have leftovers, but that doesn't mean that I don't have sub. So I think the opponent's basically inclined to keep clicking Psychic because he's special attack invested and it's going to break my sub anyway. So the thing is, what he does not know is that I have Crunch on Raikou, and so that is able to seal the game. Yep, and so you can see that the variety and combination of techs on this team really help it to break through pretty standard TSS teams like these, even though the moves are really weird. So I'm going to show you a replay where SubCune basically sweeps from T1, but there's quite a bit more nuance to this than it might meet the eye. So let's go through it. So it's Kun against Bliss Elite, which isn't silly by the way, it's a thing. So now, over here, if you are the Blissey user, what are you thinking? Well, you know that you're already kind of in trouble and you are trying to phase the SubCune out, right? But it's the right time to send in Skarm now and phase it? I mean, some people would think so. But one thing you can do is to wait for the next sub in order to phase Suicune out. And so that's what my opponent does. He goes to Skarm thinking that I am going to sub, but I instead throw out a Surf here. And this is a standard thing that I do because when you are facing a really passive team with SubCune, you cannot assume that you are, definitely going to break it through once you get the sub against Blissey. There's always going to be a hidden phaser behind. And so because Kun is faster than Celebi, I continue sweeping. But my point is that it's very important to be able to anticipate the phasers behind when you are using SubCune so as not to commit yourself to too many Calm Minds. And because I have already attacked the Skarmory, the whole team is basically gone. So this is a game where I would like to show you the value of Snorlax and DDMence against a TSS team. Now traditionally these two mons don't appear very good against TSS, but I would like to show you actually how you can use them most effectively. So let's start. Okay, so right now I'm damaging Skarm with my Snorlax. Alright. So I've beaten down Skarm pretty hard, and now I have Mixed Meta that continues the job as planned. So I managed to trade away the Swampert with Metagross, and this is great value. Right, and I managed to boom the Mence as well. Okay. So now if I just fast forward this a bit, I had no idea what this T-Tar set was, but I certainly wasn't expecting Substitute, more like just a direct Focus Punch. And so now here I'm in huge trouble. Okay, so I go to Claydol, get hit very hard. I expected a switch to Skarm here, but that didn't happen. So here I just decided to use Rain Dance in order to help Lex heal up a bit, because I felt that would be my main breaker. And so indeed now Lex facing Blissey, I'm able to get quite a bit of HP back up on Lex. Okay, so I'll just fast forward this. Okay, so now the thing I want to point out is that it seems like Lex is in a really bad position here because it's burnt. But take a look at this sequence. So now, first, Gengar has already been chipped, and now that paves the way for a DDMence sweep, at least against Gengar. And now the opponent doesn't really know what to do against a burnt Snorlax because it's still at pretty high HP, there's no sand. So he needs to get T-Tar in, but if he does get T-Tar in, then he exposes himself to Focus Punch. And Skarmory is at really low HP, so let's just take a look at that. See, because I kept Claydol alive, so he doesn't want to sacrifice Skarmory yet in case I spin away the spikes. And so he makes this move of going to T-Tar, which ends up killing the Snorlax eventually. But still, up to this point, this was a really good trade. I was able to bring down Skarmory, I was able to chip Gengar, and I was able to chip T-Tar really heavily. And all this really helps for any kind of sweep later on. Okay, so, I mean, over here I could even have countered, but I was expecting a pivot. And so let's just continue the game. So at this point, I kind of knew that I wasn't really going to be able to sweep with Kun and Raikou, but DDMence still had a chance, especially since this is Monopert, and you know, I should be able to deal with Skarmory. So let's just keep going. Alright. Raikou even came pretty close to bringing down Blissey, but that didn't happen. Okay, and now I have DDMence against Blissey, and you know, DDMence tanked the Ice Beam perfectly. And now all I needed to do was to predict the Pert switch, the Pert pivot, in order for him to gain some HP, which I did, and so he forfeits. And so what you can see is that these mons that are traditionally pretty poor against TSS can actually do pretty well if you play some tricks like keep them alive with you know, some weather clearing, make things threatening for them with the presence of your spinner. All these little things add up to really apply pressure on the Pokemon that you do intend to target with your Snorlax or your DDMence. So this replay is just a quick illustration of how the lures in this team work, specifically Lex removing Metagross for DDMence. Alright, so the main thing you will see is that this is a team where Metagross gets removed, and it's a Skarm Jolt team, so all I need to do is to chip the Starmie, which I eventually do with Suicune. Yes, with Suicune. And then once I'm able to force Starmie out with Raikou, which is another great thing about this team, because Raikou lures in Tyranitar for DDMence to set up on. And now I'm able to DD up and sweep the rest of the team. Now I realize I haven't been showing much of the Raikou action, so I'm here to show you another replay. Okay, so as usual, I break the Skarm down with Mixed Meta, except this was a different set I was using. But nevertheless, I broke the Skarm and the Pert with it. Okay, and so here is where the deception comes in. You know, I have a Skarm here. Opponent's probably thinking I'm a Mixmans and with Fire Blast because this looks like blue offense. But I DD up, and maybe the opponent is still thinking, well, I can take a DD EQ, but next comes Brick Break, which now paves the way for Raikou. And I'm not afraid of Toxic here, so I'm just going to continue Brick Breaking, but he roars. Okay. And, well, the opponent is probably thinking Starmie is going to be the star of the show. Pun not intended, because I mix offense and probably everything here dies to Starmie. So he tries his best to just sack arrow to, you know, wear Snorlax down for a Starmie sweep. Right. But what he does not expect is that... Okay, first, yeah, let's... well, deal with the Claydol crit. Now, what he does not expect is that Raikou is the last mon, and so he goes to Celebi, and again, just like the other game, you know, it's not obvious that I don't have sub over here. It doesn't really matter. Even if he leeches, I'm still going to win. But you can see that effectively everyone assumes that Raikou has sub. So anyway, I plow through this game with Crunch Raikou again. And this is another illustration of how awesome Raikou can be. So just to show you the path to topping the ladder, these days I actually make public all my replays, at least those that the opponent, you know, isn't keeping private. So you'll be able to see all my games if you search the replays tab. I'm just going to go through all of them over here. I tended to lose when I face Snorlax. Unfortunately, that is a weakness of this team, that I'm not very good against it. But otherwise, this is a pretty fun team, and I would encourage all of you to try it. Of course, it loses some of its allure due to its reliance on a little bit of deception, because that's kind of what it's kind of what makes people make these little mistakes that help you to win. But I think you know, it overall was an interesting attempt at making spikeless, sandless, trapless mix offense team work, and it was really fun just playing out and finding all the incredible synergies that this team had while I was testing it. And I believe this should be the last replay that I had when I topped the ladder. Now, I made this ladder run a little too long ago, so I'm not able to pull out the full ladder, but I did post on the Advanced OU Ladder Achievements thread over here, and I posted the team as well. It achieved a rating of 1855, which, you know, these days is not the highest, but it's decent, especially for a spikeless, trapless, weird team. So let me know if you have any comments, any thoughts on the team. You know, I don't exactly understand everything about the team myself, so if you notice anything interesting, any interesting synergies, you can let me know in the comments as well. And I hope to reach out to all of you again.